don't know about you guys, but there was just a crap ton of information in this reveal. A lot more than I thought we were going to get, but it's all pretty exciting if you ask me. Now, obviously, Edge of Fate looks cool, looks interesting. I don't think it's going to be the best Destiny expansion that's ever been released. That's not what it needs to be. We'll get into the details of it soon, but yeah, Renegades looks crazy, and I'll talk more about that in a bit, and how Renegades can set a precedent for future forays into different universes, while, you know, staying within the lines of the Destiny universe. And before you go saying, like, are we gonna have Jabba the Hutt or Jar Jar Binks in Destiny 2? No, it's going to be purely Destiny characters, just with a Star Wars vibe to it. And again, we'll get more into that in a little bit. But I am going to ask, if you've been watching some of my content and enjoying it, please consider subscribing. Around 99% of people who watch are not subscribed, so please consider doing that. I think just in general, the Edge of Fate looks cool in the sense of the design of the planet Kepler. It's really, really cool. And just a little refresher on what the 9 are. We have 9 celestial bodies within the Sol system, 8 planets, and the sun. So, the 9 match that. Basically, they're all individuals, and if you've read any lore on the 9, you know they each have their own language. It's very weird, and, my guess with what we see in the trailer, this is just speculation, my guess is, though, that the emissary, aka Orin, she was previously known as Orin, that she is being taken over by one of the more maleficent members of the 9, and is trying to exert their will over her, and she's not having any of it, as you see in the trailer. And Red of the 9, which is an in-game event happening right now, refreshing 3 dungeons, is supposed to kind of tell us the story of how she gets to that point. And if you missed it, the new expansion, The Edge of Fate, will be dropping on July 15th. Destiny 2 Renegades, the Star Wars themed expansion, will release sometime in December. I don't think we got an exact date yet, although I'm sure somebody's extrapolated, the rough date of that, because, it has to be a Tuesday and all that jazz. So Edge of Fate will begin with us being invited to a specific place at a specific time for a specific reason. We're going to go explore this planet in the Oort cloud called Kepler, and it's going to be a Metroidvania experience, apparently. Think of how the Nether, you go and you explore and you find little secrets. It's kind of similar to that, and they're really trying to bake in like Dreaming City elements into Kepler, and there's a lot of different enemy types. It seems there was some Scorn and Fallen flying around, or Scorn or Fallen, rather. That looked really cool. The base Vandals, the melee Vandals, had like a new strand thing as well. I just have to say that it's so nice to get this portal, because, it hasn't happened to me too much, because I'm not a huge content creator like some of the other people out there that have larger communities, but I do have some people who ask me, where do I start? And I do think the portal is a decent place. It still doesn't explain everything, and the new player experience and the returning player experience is still really confusing and needs to be brushed up. Like, I'm out here typing paragraphs to someone who hasn't played the game in a while or at all, and trying to explain what they need to do and how to do it. And it's very difficult, because if someone just asks you, where should I start, you don't know what they own in terms of the DLCs, you don't know what they've played already, and you don't know what dungeon keys they have. Typically, I'd be like, go play the Final Shape, but what if they don't have the Final Shape DLC? They can't do the campaign, they can't get Prismatic, and so on, right? So I hope something more in-depth is introduced alongside with this. I mean, maybe we'll see some more details as we get closer to the release, but I think having a place for solo players to go and being able to do strikes on your own is really cool. Aside from that, I think that's the biggest improvement that we're seeing, because the the solo player experience is sometimes not that great. It does allow you to pick what you want to do, when you want to do it. They're supposedly upping the pinnacle drops in Crucible to be easier to get to pinnacle cap. I don't know how true that's going to be. And I did peek this, and I'm sure people will be talking about this. There is a new difficulty, or at least there will be a new difficulty above GM called Ultimate. There's going to be more customization, similar to the challenge cards that we had for Nightfalls forever ago. I think that was like a D2 vanilla thing. I honestly can't remember. Maybe someone can let me know down in the comments, but basically it looks very similar to that. So armor's getting updated, right? We're gonna have the essentially origin traits for armor pieces. This piece that I'll throw on the screen now for the Aeon Renewal Strides, you can see that it has the 2-piece Force Converter perk. After a final blow with any rocket launcher or grenade launcher, sprint for a short time to gain speed booster. And this is all about speed, so you can see the bottom one is once per activation of Force Converter, sprinting while at critical health, being suspended or being slowed by a stasis effect will immediately grant speed booster for a short duration. And I'm sure there's going to be different things to build into. You can also see on the bottom right, you have a health meter that probably increases your health. You have melee, which helps with your melee and all that jazz. So very interesting. And you see the power too. I think we're probably looking at a power reset. So that'll definitely be interesting to see. They said in the TWID that there will be more details about that in a future update. There are also now tiers to armor and weapons, with tier 5 being what you want to chase. I don't remember what they said specifically about chasing that stuff, but basically tier 5, if you want to min-max, if you don't really care, just throw whatever you want on, find the perks for the armor that you desire the most and roll with that, right? There was also Matter Spark, which seemed interesting. You basically turn into a non-corporeal ball of energy, and you can float around and sneak into little crevices and like air vents and whatnot. It looks really cool. I'm not sure how good it's going to be. It might be a little strong because I don't know. It looks like you're almost impervious in that form, but we'll see once we get our hands on it and see more gameplay. Definitely very, very interesting to see how that plays out. And of course they added Gordon Freeman, or more well known maybe Fallout plays is going to be in the game. Like, this guy looks like everyone. I think there's a Life is Strange character that looks like him. Kind of looks like Glad in Fallout had a baby. The Fallen House that will be on Kepler is the House of Exile, if you're interested in that little lore tidbit. Of course, there'll be new activities, new exotic quests on these updates. As you can see on this roadmap I'm going to put up now, you can see that Edge of Fate will begin Reclamation, Season of Reclamation, whatever. You'll get the reward pass. It's very similar to Episodes, so you get the first pass reward thing in the first half of the season, and then the second half will unlock, I'm sure, more rewards on that battle pass, as well as quest missions, whatever. One thing to acknowledge here is that there'll be a new raid in the Edge of Fate, and then a dungeon in Renegades, which I think I'm honestly okay with. We just got Sunder Doctrine, so it's not like we haven't had a dungeon in a while, and they've been pumping out dungeons like crazy. So, I think a new raid is obviously overdue at this point, but not really overdue. It's just what needs to happen next, because it's the natural order of things, and at least in the world of Destiny. So it seems with the portal stuff and a whole bunch of other things, and we'll get to some of the bigger stuff here in a little bit, they're trying to make Destiny more approachable. And it is difficult to make it approachable, but still cater to the hardcore, dedicated community. And I think Rite of the Nine is actually a really, really, really good example of that, at least so far. You have the Explore mode, which is great for people who've never played these dungeons, who want to, explore this content, and maybe they never have. It's free as well, so you get to see it's basically a trial of this content to see if you're interested in it. And then you have Ultimatum, which isn't super hard. I don't think it's quite on the level of a contest level dungeon, but it isn't easy. So, you know, it's kind of like that happy medium, and you know, it's not too challenging. So some people might be like, oh, this is too easy. And then someone who's new who might try it out is like, man, this is really difficult. What are you talking about? And that's just how a game like Destiny works. You have different levels of skill, and there's always going to be that divide in the player base. And there's always going to be people who say content creators ruin the game. That's not necessarily true. Sure, there are some things that maybe they ruin, like, you know, talking about something that's bugged or just really, really good, and Bungie's like, oh, we see you sharing that, we're nerfing it. But usually Bungie gives us a little bit of time with that stuff. Lord of Wolves is a good example. Of course, now that's been nerfed, it's not as good. So that's probably the best example I can think of. But usually, right, you'll see someone post a short about, oh, this gun's broken, go use it, and that happens anyways. Like, that's just the natural order of things. But content creators are the backbone of any game. At least I think they are, because they build communities, they help out new players, and they try to, I think, show what is best about Destiny, which is the community. And hopefully Bungie doesn't disappoint us with these upcoming updates, and hopefully they deliver, because everything looks super promising. There'll also be a heavy metal event thing that's going on today, actually, Friday on the 9th, and there's also going to be a title. If you don't know what heavy metal is, it's a new Crucible mode that is Briggs versus tanks. Briggs being the fallen Titanfall-esque machine things, and yeah, you're going to be able to use those, which is really cool, and I hope they do more of that in the future in other activities. And the big thing, right, is we're finally getting a testing range. You're gonna be able to use abilities. You're gonna be able to use your guns whenever, wherever. It's just phenomenal. I don't think I can speak enough to how huge this is. I think this alone is, I don't want to say this alone is better than what any expansion could give you, but again, it just makes your life so much easier. You have a build you want to test the efficacy of, and you don't have to go into a lost sector every single time you want to test a build out, and you can simulate the conditions for that build in order to see if it works. Whereas, you know, if you want to use it in a raid setting on raid difficulty enemies or in a GM, you have to do a GM and test it out there, and sometimes the build might not be good and you have to tweak it and come back to the build, and it's a waste of time, right? Whereas in a testing range, you can do that while you're in the activity, as opposed to, you know, you're in a GM by yourself or with friends and you're throwing or whatever. But more stuff like this in the future needs to happen. We need more things that the community has been asking for. I know I'm not trying to bite the hand that feeds. I'm just saying this is one thing that the community has asked for forever, since the tribute hall went bye-bye. And, you know, we can talk apartments, we can talk organizing shader UIs and UIs in general in the game. I think there's little things too that aren't as big as a testing range, and you know, I can't think of all of them off the top of my head, but I'm sure people have their grievances and their pet peeves and whatnot. And it really is, you know, what's practical, what can Bungie do, and also what does the community want the most? What would help the community the most? And this is a pretty big one. So now, time for some thoughts. I think that Renegades is a really, really cool concept, and I hope this isn't a one-time thing. And I don't just mean for Star Wars. I know that the optics of this are like, it's a cash grab, right? They're trying to rake in that Star Wars money, and I think there is a little bit of truth to that. I mean, I'd be lying if I said there wasn't. But Destiny 2 is a sci-fi game. A little bit. It's also a fantasy game, you know, has a bunch of other themes that fit in with Star Wars, space magic is one of those, so it fits really, really well, and it makes sense. I know it kind of feels gimmicky to have a different universe intertwined with another, but you look at how some games pull it off pretty well. I think Kingdom Hearts is a great example of that. Now, I don't think Destiny's gonna do that, right? I think the armor sets are cool. You know, you have Vader for Titans, you have Kylo Ren for Warlocks, which I feel bad for Warlocks. Kylo Ren is kind of an L, but I really don't know who else they could have done. And, you know, there's questions, of course, about licensing, which I'm sure for Vader in general was something that was hard to get. And I kind of wish the Hunters got that one, I'll be for real, because the Darth Vader cape would be so cool. But General Grievous, I think, is a solid option for that. And, you know, I think if we're going down this route, hopefully at some point we'll be able to have like a Jedi outfit, and obviously the Hunters fit that pretty well. But, you know, outside of the armor sets, I just think it helps with the fantasy part of Destiny to intertwine these universes. And, you know, we've kind of had this already with Halo in the 30th anniversary pack, where, you know, we're using the Halo pistol, the sword from the Covenant, from the Sangheili. We're using the energy sword that the Sangheili use in Halo. And of course, you know, countless emotes and other things that come from the Halo universe. But of course, Bungie made Halo, but this is a different Bungie, right? So I think you can see how that's similar to this. Obviously, it's similar, but it's not the same, because it's a whole other franchise. It's a whole other universe. And I'm not sure how many more IPs you could fit into this, especially ones that work, right? I think Star Wars works the best. The only other one I can think about is Star Trek, but I really, really doubt anyone in the Destiny community would be super ecstatic for that. Whereas Bungie probably has the data on the original Star Wars collab, and they can assume that if people bought into those armor sets, that they are going to buy in to Renegades. Now, obviously, some people might put two and two together and be like, oh, they saw how well the collab did, and they're like, we're gonna make a Destiny Star Wars expansion. And I highly doubt that they had enough time in the dev timeline to figure that out. Because the collab, I think, happened beginning of Heresy, and this expansion was in development long before that was released, although I'm sure it was part of their plan, right, to release one set originally, see how it did, and, you know, gauge the response, kind of dip your toes in the water to see the reception of that, and go from there. But it is scary, and it is exciting, because Bungie has never done anything like this before, so you're not sure if it's going to succeed. But it's also exciting because it is new, it's different, and it's kind of what we've been asking, right? We're shaking up the formula with the cadence of these expansions, and we're also incorporating themes from different IPs to, again, shake up that formula and, you know, take a break maybe from the Destiny aesthetic. And I think that lightsabers and blasters fit perfectly into the Destiny universe, and I'm personally so excited to see how everything works. Forerunner has been pretty good throughout its history. I don't think it's the best gun in the game, obviously, and obviously Half-Truths really is just used for mobility with Eager Edge, but that has in part changed the way Destiny movement works, and I think that there's the potential for that in Renegades. And not only that, it will undoubtedly market Destiny as a game to so many new people who enjoy Star Wars alone and maybe want to try out Destiny 2. That's also part of the plan. You know, until we see more about Renegades, I think everyone will be slightly skeptical because it is different, and you can be fearful as a longtime fan of that change, but you can also be excited for how it might pan out. Again, we'll just have to see in September what they have to show to us. Oh, and by the way, Renegades is available December 2nd. I said earlier that the date wasn't confirmed. It is. Anyways, that's all I have for now. I'm sorry I rambled a bit, but this again was just a lot of information, and I wanted to try to talk about everything I could. And the reason this is coming out on Friday, I know the reveal happened on Tuesday, but I kind of just needed to sit back and soak all this information in and kind of wait and see what else was going to come out, if anything. And the TWID helped me remember everything that was talked about in the stream. There are some questions on the TWID about the reveal. If you want to go check that out, I'll leave that in the description. Things that maybe you had after watching the reveal, or rather questions you may have had. So make sure you go check that out if you're confused about anything. Let me know what your thoughts on the reveal are so far, and yeah, see ya.